Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review the coming-of-age story, This Too Shall Pass. And this is from director Rob Grant, from writers Michael Simon Baker and Grant himself. And here we have Maxwell Jenkins playing Simon, a 16-year-old suffocated by his strict Mormon upbringing, rebels and crosses the border with friends for a weekend in Canada as they individually discover more about themselves. And he's chasing after a girl in Canada because, of course, why else would a boy of that age at this time go up north of the border, is because he's chasing after a girl. And it's a coming-of-age story, so of course. This film very much has the different, types of vibes here. And it's definitely influenced by a lot of 80s coming-of-age stories. And there's certainly references to Say Anything, very specifically. And, it lives in that space. But it does give that, stench of, being very derivative of those types of films and falls into a lot of those tropes. And, you have this strict family, and you have Simon's father, actually played by Robert Longstreet, who I'm a big fan of, really love his work, and he has a lot of presence, and he's an intimidating figure here. But then you have this group of friends who, that's to varying degrees of interest. There's a wide range of different types of things, like young Simon is a Mormon and doesn't do anything and is, chasing after this girl who may or may not be really interested, and meets this really cool girl at some point in the film, and is he going to blow it? And Katie Douglas, who plays her, I really enjoy her as an actor. She had been in Clown in a Cornfield earlier this year, and I really liked her in that. And, there's one story where one of them is gay, and one of them's a fat kid, and you have all these little elements here, and to be frank, some of these kids can be really insufferable. And there's also moments where you have these characters reacting in ways that feel so out of left field just to build up tension. And it's honestly quite frustrating with how some of these storylines and story beats flesh out and then wrap themselves up so nicely at the end to be like, hey, look, you could get past these things, but it never feels earned. And it happens with multiple, romantic connections in this. And this film is just so outlandish and keeps going and going in terms of, all these crazy turn of events. And they aggressively try to make sure that, these American kids realize that Canadian people are not super nice. And you're like, this feels very aggressively anti-Canadian in such a weird, odd way. And there's just so many things about this film that don't fully click. And then you have this framing device where Simon's telling this whole story to this police officer. That police officer winds up being a really cool dude and one of the most interesting characters in the film. And, you have an interesting, sprinkle of, even, Michael Ironside is randomly one of the cops in Canada. And you're just this film feels so random and scattered and unfocused, leaning into a lot of very clunky tropes when it comes to coming-of-age stories. But, not gonna lie, it got me a little bit by the end of the film, where you got through all the muck of the ups and downs of this story, but then it still hooked your heartstrings there at the end, where you're just I was a little frustrated that this movie got me by the end, but it worked. And I'm not going to say this is a fresh, interesting coming-of-age story. I think Grant's playing around with a lot of messy elements. And some of these young performers I do like. Jeremy Ray Taylor, who was Ben in It, and was in London Calling very recently with Josh Duhamel. And, some of these characters I enjoyed. Some of them were just way too much, and, this film felt very manufactured in terms of a lot of conflict. But at the end of the day, this is a solid, watchable kind of coming-of-age story that, if this is really the genre that you like, and you really love those like 80s John Hughes coming-of-age stories, this wears its passion for those on its sleeve. And at the end of the day, it has its moments. But those are my thoughts on This Too Shall Pass. Let me know what you think, and let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.